There we go. Welcome to our town hall. We will have a series of these this month. I'm going to give you some information and then ask for some information as well. And there'll be more stuff coming out as the month goes on. So what I want to do is go through, first off, how we're going to run the town hall. It'll be first a moment of gratitude. Then I'll share dates, information about reopening you need to know, a couple of brief announcements, and then most of the time will be for questions and answers. The gratitude is thank you to all the members on this call and others, whether they are families, staff members, supporters. We have had a really positive community experience throughout the pandemic, despite all of the pain and the hardship and everything we've been through. And the care and consistency and community that we focused on has, as a school, been resounding through the families as well. And we often think of ourselves at the school as servants of the community, but we've actually been really helped by the community. So I want to thank all the families for the patience, for the participation, and everything that family members have done to help us get through this pandemic together. So that appreciation is very much there. Here are some things to share for the year coming up. This is starting to look a little bit more like a normal school year. We're not back to normal. Believe me, we're not. We understand about the Delta variant. We understand about all the cases, but we are coming back to campus. And we're starting to do some things that we did not do a year ago that we're excited to start again. Family interviews will be over Zoom. So they'll start that last week of August. And the idea behind family interviews is for the new teachers to get to know, or you may have the same teachers last year. I won't say a new teacher, but your child's teacher, to get to know the child through your eyes as a parent or guardian, to start building community even before the school year begins. And then the family barbecue is back. If you were at the street fair in the spring, you got a sense of the energy and how it feels to be back together in that schoolyard. It's very exciting. We will ask everyone to wear a mask, and we're not going to do the traditional food. We're going to be doing takeout. So as you leave, you get food. That's the barbecue this year because of COVID, so that we're not eating together and taking our masks off on that first time back together. School will start in person September 1st for all classes, all grades. I'll mention a couple of caveats a little later on. Pre-K and kindergarten as usual for half day for the first few days. That will be until 12 o'clock. And here are the big notes. So we are coming back to campus, like I said, but we're doing it with a couple of caveats. COVID safety precautions are still very much in effect, and we'll talk about those more on the next slide. I mentioned earlier our main focus of care, safety, and consistency. Those are the guiding lights for us, and we know that our new plan for this year, with the new data and new information that we have learned about what's happening with the virus, we have a different approach based on different circumstances, but still guided by those same principles: care, safety, consistency. We learned last year, we took a bet that remote learning would be better for our community than trying to get back in person or doing hybrid. And that bet was rewarded by families giving us feedback. The consistency that every morning at 8:30, the same teacher is going to be there for morning meeting on Zoom, whether you're on campus having childcare on campus or whether you're at home, that consistency was there. And we heard from families that was really powerful and important because our school is about relationships. The alternative for hybrid learning was that children over the course of the year would experience different teachers in different settings. So in the DOE, for example, if you were home for 3 days, in school for 2 days, for those 3 days, you didn't have a teacher, you had assignments to complete, and there was no what they called synchronous learning. There was no Zoom, there was no video because the teacher was busy teaching. For the 2 days, you might have had this teacher one week and that teacher the next week as the numbers shifted. So we didn't have any of that. You had the same teacher all year. We're looking to take the same approach in a different environment this year. So we are going to have a small remote learning program, which is only for a limited number of students with immunocompromised situations or severe illnesses. We'll share more information about that as we hear more from the community. I also want to note one more caveat. We have not gotten any state guidance yet. So any school that says they know exactly what's going to happen is not telling the truth. We are waiting for the DOH and the New York State Education Department to give us guidelines. We all can guess what's going to happen. We've gotten some information that we're encouraged to be back on campus. We're expected to be back together, and we are allowed to make those little caveats. If we have students with severe illnesses, they can have remote learning. So we're planning on what I just said. We're also preparing for different scenarios. We're hopeful that we're on the other side with all the vaccination that's happening, but we're wary about the variants, as I mentioned to everyone on the last town hall we had in the spring. We're concerned about that, and so we're getting ready just in case. If the whole city shuts down again, then we will go back to our virtual school. So the virtual school will be ready on day one, just in case. But that's not the plan. It's plan B. Plan A is on campus. I mentioned I would share the safety routines. Oh, I should mention one more thing. If you are a non-English speaker and you see the languages here in Spanish, if you would want to see this presentation in French or in Arabic, those presentations are available. And I'm going to go back to the first slide, and I'll put those addresses in the chat. If you would like to see this presentation in French, it is the first link listed there, and it's going to be in the chat in a moment. And if you'd like to see it in Arabic, it is the second link that's in the chat. Okay, sorry, I forgot to mention that. So back to the safety routines. You might hear about social distancing. You might hear about masks. You might hear about sanitizer, and everybody's got hand sanitizer coming out of their ears. I'm going to tell you that I've been watching the science really carefully. And indoor, all those things are important. Masks are needed. The most important element is ventilation. And you can, if you think about it for a minute, you'll understand what I mean when I say that. When people are outside, everyone feels more confident. You see fewer masks. You hear about less transmission. You hear, in the protests, there wasn't a lot of COVID. It's indoor where the problem is. Well, why is that? Because the air is moving and carrying the virus away. When you have an indoor room where there is not air circulation, that is a COVID trap. And it doesn't matter if you're 3 feet away or 20 feet away. If you stay in that room and the air isn't being circulated, you are at risk. So that's why since March of 2020, our focus in the building has been ventilation as number one. And the city has responded. They've been working on it. We now have fans and blowers that have not been updated and have engines or motors replaced in decades, have been upgraded and are back and fully operational. So you will hear, if you come in the building, you will hear engines and motors whirring in certain rooms where there was nothing before. And there is a vent in every room. There's one room without a vent. It's not a classroom, it's an office, and we're getting a HEPA filter for that office. We are setting up a couple of things to make sure ventilation is strong. We're monitoring it all the time. There are standards for ventilation. I've had to learn a lot about this since the pandemic has happened. We're making sure the air turnover is consistent in all of our rooms. So it's more like the outdoors when you're inside our classrooms. We're putting in policies in place so that our teachers and staff follow the same procedures. For example, the doors open, the windows open, and the fan, which is air conditioner running as a fan, or if it's hot, running as an air conditioner continuously. So the air is always being circulated and always moving around. And then you will have a much better, more safe environment than if you have the doors closed, the windows closed. We will not leave that to chance. The second thing is masking. So we do have a requirement that we'll have in place that all staff and students wear masks at all times. The only exception, of course, is for meals. And we had a lot of success with this in the spring and the winter when we had small groups on campus with remote learning on campus. There was a lot of concern all of us had about how will the kids deal with the masks, what's going to happen with the masks, what if they don't like the mask, they take them off. I can tell you that we almost had zero issues with masks. A couple of students hey, remember to pull that mask over your nose, keep it up, the reminders, the base simple things. We didn't see any students who had physical issues with the masks or who struggled. They just got used to it. And I think you understand that experience being outside. If I'm outside without a mask right now, I feel weird. So you may feel the same way. I think the kids got used to it and they will as well. And I'll just add a personal note. Around the country, you see news reports about parents saying, oh my goodness, my child shouldn't be wearing a mask, let the child be free. There was even a protest in Staten Island. What I've noticed is children who have problems with masks are usually following their parents who have problems with masks. So if you support the mask mandate, then your child will support the mask mandate as well. It's not an overwhelming burden, and it's much better than COVID. As I know, some of us who've been on this call can testify having had it. We will do social distancing in common areas. What that means is, again, going on an experience in the winter and spring, we had children who were not 3 feet apart. They were closer than that in the classroom, but the way we arranged the desks so they weren't facing each other, and with the continuous airflow, we had no problems. And I know that will continue to be the case this fall. But in common areas, it's less planned. It's not like we can arrange the seats and set up the rooms because the hallways are the hallways. So stairwells, traveling through, gym, cafeteria, all these places, we will use our social distancing expectations and guidelines to make sure that there's an additional layer of protection. The next one on the list, and I know this is one that was another big focus early on in the pandemic that's become less of a focus because the science tells us it's less important. Limited use of communal materials. The data tells us that COVID does not really spread from being left on items. It doesn't live very long once it's out off the air and on the ground or on a toy or something. So I will not say that we will have no communal materials. That was true in this last year for us. We had no use of communal, everything was in personal material. You had your own Unifix cubes, you had your own crayons or whatever. Instead, we're going to limit the use of communal materials. We'll have some where we feel like it's necessary to run the school. But that's coupled with, that only works, to be sure, if there's good hand washing and hygiene. So hand washing will be continuous, regular. There'll be hand sanitizer everywhere, just like you've experienced, I'm sure, in other places. We have plenty of it on hand, and we'll bring in more hand sanitizer everywhere. The place smells like a bar with all the alcohol and the hand sanitizer. Okay, it's a bad joke, but it smells like hand sanitizer factory because there's so much hand sanitizer. And I don't think it's alcohol hand sanitizer anyway, because schools, we purchased non-alcohol hand sanitizer. Next, in terms of distancing, breakfast and lunch. So normally, if you've been in our school, you have seen breakfast where we're all packed together and crowded in the cafeteria. You've got hundreds of kids, you've got parents, we're all on top of each other, we're leaning over, can I help you with the milk? Don't cough in my face. That's the normal environment. We won't have that this year. First of all, we will not be able to have families in the cafeteria at breakfast until COVID is over. We'll come back to it one day. We need to have distancing. And second of all, we're going to have a mix of meals in classrooms, outside, and in the cafeteria. If we put all of our kids in the cafeteria at once, we couldn't do social distancing with masks off like we're planning on doing right now. So there will be smaller groups in these settings. That's one of the considerations we've made that we think is an important one to keep us safe. And then finally, to testing. I know there'll be questions about this, so I want to address how we're planning on handling it, and there's still a little incomplete information. The first thing is for any unvaccinated staff members, and most of our staff is vaccinated, but not all of our staff is at this time. But for any unvaccinated staff members, there will be weekly testing. So they will provide a negative COVID test to the school. So if you see an adult working for us in our building, you will know for sure that either they are vaccinated or they have a very recent negative COVID test. And we are very serious and very focused, and we're communicating with our staff about this really clearly. I will not take a chance of having a staff member who may be asymptomatic, but coming in the building unvaccinated and possibly carrying the COVID virus to pass that on to a child, because we know none of our students are old enough to be vaccinated. So every adult who works for us in the building will either be vaccinated or will be sharing a weekly negative COVID test. What happens if a staff member doesn't show us a negative COVID test in the appointed time? I'm sorry, you have to take a sick day and go home until you can give us a negative COVID test. We're very serious about it. Safety is number one. We're not taking any chances. And then that leads to the final one, which is random testing for students. So you may have seen that charter schools last year were not allowed to be a part of the DOE's surveillance testing program, where they would randomly pick 20% of students in each school and give them a COVID test, a PCR COVID test. There was a lawsuit. Charters won, and we now have access to that free testing program. Last year, we set up our own testing with a different company. We did weekly testing for all students, which was feasible, the smaller group that we had, 60 kids. So this year, we're going to be working with the DOE. We have not gotten the details yet on how that's going to work. So once we do, we may be supplementing it with more tests if we feel like it's not enough, but we anticipate it'll be similar to last year, which means 20% of the kids each week randomly picked will be tested for COVID. What kind of test is it? It's not super invasive. It is a test of like taking a Q-tip and putting it in your nostril, not jamming it way up. In the beginning, we had these COVID tests. You may remember, may have taken them where we had needles going way up and it felt like I had one in my brain. That's not what we're doing here. We're talking about the less invasive, just in your nostril swab. We did this every week. The aim was for all students on campus in the spring. There was not a single complaint or concern of any of the kids. We explained it. We had trusted adults with them, helping them, and we were there for them all the way through. And it just became another routine, like masks, very simple. Okay, I got my COVID test. Now I go back to class. If you have any questions about it, I'm glad to answer those, but I don't have complete answers yet. I will give you answers at a future time if I can't answer them, because like I said, we're still waiting on both state guidelines and on the details of COVID testing from the city. Although we have a pretty good sense, like I said, about what to expect. And thank you for holding your questions. You can always put them in the chat, but I will address Q&A at the end. Okay, what are our biggest worries and our best case scenarios? Our biggest worries are that we have not enough people around the city being vaccinated, and we have increased community spread. And what that means is we can't control that. We can be as safe as possible in our building. I worry that I'm breaking up. Okay. We can be as safe as possible in the building, but if the COVID rates are rising around us, we may have to, like everyone else, shut down school again and go back to complete virtual. So that's a big concern we have. We feel really confident about our plan in the building. Once you're here, we feel good. What's happening out there, we can't control, and that's our biggest fear. The second thing is, over time, if this pandemic drags on, we're worried about all of us becoming complacent and just used to it, and then say, well, you know, what's the big deal with the mask? Nobody's sick, because that's how spikes begin. They start small and they grow quickly. We don't want complacency. Oh, who cares about the test? You know, what's the big deal? I don't think they're sick. You know, they're not showing any fever or anything. No, you can't be here if you're an adult who isn't vaccinated and hasn't gotten a negative result on a COVID test. So that complacency we're fighting against. And I feel confident that we won't have that complacency, because as one of the key school leaders, I'm up at night worried about this, and I will not let any chance occur that a child will get COVID at our school. And I feel that sense of urgency to make sure that we're safe as number one, with that care, safety, and consistency. And if it's September 1st or October 15th or December 1st, if the pandemic is still happening, we are focusing on safety and not taking any chances. What's our biggest hope? Our biggest hope is that we can get back to normal relatively soon. Pandemics actually do have an end. Sometimes they take years, but sometimes, and this one's been going for 1.5 years now, but sometimes they end kind of quickly out of the blue. Sometimes, and this was true of the SARS pandemic, which was almost 20 years ago. You may remember it. COVID is very related to SARS. It's one of the SARS viruses. It was a big concern in East Asia, and there was a lot of masking and all the lockdowns there, and we were preparing for that in this country, but it never really made it here as a pandemic because the virus burned out before it got here. And that's not a cautionary tale, it's a hopeful tale. It's possible that for unknown reasons, the virus might just peter out. A lot of people predicted that would happen with COVID because of SARS. Obviously it didn't, it's still here. The variants have come up, and there's the Delta variant, now there's Delta Plus, there's Lambda, there are different variants that have different properties and that are more contagious, more serious, more worrisome. So we keep that vigilance, but we're hopeful that all of these variants will dissipate of their own volition if we just stay careful and stay protected. I have a couple of announcements. Before I go to them, I just want to be clear. Our plan, I'm going to go back here because I see a couple of comments in the chat. Our plan is to be back on campus. We have been told by CDC, we've been given preliminary information by the state, and we are following the lead a bit of the mayor, who has said there will be no remote option in the DOE schools. We would like to have a limited remote option for any students who have serious immunocompromising illnesses or other severe illnesses like a lung disease. We don't want to take those chances, but our expectation is that we are back on campus, and that's what our plan is. And we know that we can keep everyone safe using the protections that I offered earlier. Okay, the two quick announcements before I get to Q&A, or three. One is we're going to need your help with something. Again, we need your help with your patience and your support. But your help now is one of the things that's happened in the pandemic is the governor suspended something called the Open Meetings Law and a related law called the Public Officers Law. And that allowed our board and others to meet virtually. Our board could always have virtual participation, but it was different when we could just set up a Zoom and have that as the meeting. Families found it much more accessible, and staff members as well, to attend board meetings. There is a push in New York State, now that the governor's order has expired, to amend this law to allow boards like ours to meet virtually for greater access and transparency. I've signed a petition sending letters to legislators asking them to consider this. And so we ask you to do the same. You don't have to do it. It's your choice. Read it, make sure you're comfortable with it. There's no downside to it. It's about transparency in government, and it's about helping our school be more open and flexible. So look for this petition in the next family update, which is coming out very soon. We have a new resource we've learned about, which is called Home-Based Homeless Prevention Network from Services for the Underserved. If you or someone you know is facing eviction, and I know there was another moratorium put out by the CDC, but these things can change at any moment. There is an organization we found that is offering support. And when I say serious support, they're going to ask a lot of information from you. It's a nonprofit, so you have to trust them to follow through. They would ask for things like your ID, your information about your family, information about any income, any judgments made against you, any letters you've received from your landlord, things like that. But their entire purpose is to support people who are going through the eviction process and keep them from being evicted. So that's the goal here. It's a big crisis that may be about to happen that we hope can be forestalled and prevented, but you can call the number there, which again will be in our family update. You can also walk in at their address, which is in Washington Heights. And finally, a reminder to mark your calendar for the family barbecue on August 25th. It goes from 4 to 6:30 p.m. Okay, next, the last part of this is the biggest part, the question and answer. I see a couple of questions have come in. So we've said school starts September 1st. There is a very small virtual option, very small, and it's only for health reasons. So we'll give more information about that once we survey the families and we find out where people are. And there is a survey we're developing that will be coming out very soon. And the survey also relates to uniforms. So a couple of notes about uniforms. First of all, many families have not worn uniforms at our school because we've been virtual for so long. The colors, they're navy blue for pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade. That's the top. The second grade, third grade, and fourth grade is burgundy. And the fifth grade is hunter green. That's the shirt. And there's a school logo on it. The bottoms are dark gray, charcoal gray, pants, skirt, skirt, or jumper. And you can accessorize however you want within reason. So we're really hopeful that people will be personal and express themselves while still maintaining the same uniform. If you have to buy the uniform from Flynn O'Hara, which Ms. Ryan put in the contact there in the chat. You don't have to buy from Flynn O'Hara. If there's another place you can go to buy the same color shirt and then get a patch. Some families have done that as well. And most importantly, we are working on a hand-me-down program, which I think is going to be much more important this year because we've all grown. I know I've grown horizontally. Our kids have all grown vertically. So we're grown out of our uniforms. So in the survey, we're going to be asking you, do you have uniform pieces you can give to a hand-me-down program? Or are you interested in receiving a hand-me-down uniform? So that will be part of the survey, and we can arrange all that between now and the family barbecue on the 25th. Okay. And I mentioned the uniform is the color, certain colors with the logo. There's been a patch before, which is an option as well on the top. There's charcoal gray everywhere else. And then the shoes should be black. They can be sneakers. They can be any kind of shoes you want as long as they're all black. Okay, we'll provide more information about uniforms when we do a family update so people can be super clear. If you were new to the school last year, you will get your uniform at the family barbecue, or you can come to the school and arrange to pick it up beforehand. So I would call the school to make sure that your size is in right now, and otherwise you can get it at the family barbecue. Okay. Let's have some more questions. So Ms. Blackman, we can chat offline separately about your situation. And anybody have any other questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask or put them in the chat. I'll try and take this share off so we can see each other. There we go. We had a session in the morning, and when the questions slowed down, I wanted to generate more questions. So I put us into breakout groups, and we had groups of 4 or 5 just catching up and talking, and then a couple more questions came out. So we'll do that in a moment. Before I do that, I just want to announce the rest of the series of town halls we're having. On Tuesday at 5 p.m., and this time may change depending on our outside resource, we are having a town hall for staff and families about general safety in the community with our return. Next Wednesday, we're having town halls at noon and 5. Again, the same thing, both sessions on federal funding. We have gotten Biden bucks, they're calling it. We've got some money from the federal government that we've allocated for spending to support us getting through the pandemic. We want to report that out to the families and also get any additional input on that spending. And the following Wednesday, again at 12 and at 5, we're going to be having our final tune-up town hall about the safety procedures. We hope that we have more information from the state and from the city with testing so that we can confirm everything I've said and make sure that we're 100% online about that, because this is everything we've planned. We've gotten very little guidance, as I said earlier. Okay, so if there are no further questions, I'm going to put us in some breakout groups and ask you to take 5 minutes, and I'll pause the recording and just catch up. Say hello. If you don't know the people who you're with, introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.